Dolan was in kindergarten, he was sitting by himself one day, minding his own business and generally being pretty quiet. A girl walked over to Dolan, staring at him. He asked her what she wanted, but she just kept staring at him. Suddenly, her pants were covered in pee. A teacher walked over and asked what was going on. Before Dolan could say anything, the girl yelled, "He peed in my pants!" The teacher looked disgusted and sent Dolan to timeout. He sat there, baffled, unsure of why the teacher believed he actually peed someone else's pants.
Dean was working the night shift at a business office when his boss went up to him. He asked him to shit on his coworker's computer. When Dean asked why, his boss told him that he wanted him to quit and that he would pay him $700 if he did it. Since he needed the money, and despite the coworker also being a friend, Dean did what his boss asked him to do and took a shit on the computer. The next morning, his coworker saw the pile of shit on his computer and immediately quit.
During lunch, some guy was throwing baby carrots at Sid. The carrots were piling up on the table, so he decided to put them in a bag and throw them away. When he tossed the bag in the trash, one of the supervising teachers saw Sid and claimed he was starting a food fight and wasting food. When he tried to explain, the teacher sent him to the vice principal, who already disliked Sid, and he was given a week of after-school detention. How dare he get hit by several carrots?
Ladybot's school had a rule where students weren't allowed to talk to friends during lunchtime. It became a rule when she was in grade 4 because apparently the cafeteria was too loud when kids were eating. The teacher said the students should use this time to eat, not talk to your friends. Ladybot didn't know about the rule because she was out sick when they announced it. So when she came back to school the next day, she was completely confused that the cafeteria was so quiet. She started talking and her friends quickly told her about the talking ban before she got in trouble.
Andy once worked in a restaurant with one of her friends, who worked as a waiter. One time, she dropped the food on the floor. When Andy went to clean it up, her friend ran away, and her boss came up and got angry. He blamed her for dropping the food and punished her by demanding that she eat the food from off the dirty floor. If she didn't, she would be fired. Since she was broke, Andy decided that it would be best to obey her boss. Her boss was surprised that Andy ate all the food that was dropped, and he gave her $100.
Once when Salty Squid went to the beach, he went swimming and overheard some other kids saying there had been jellyfish and shark sightings recently. He figured it was just something kids say to each other to freak them out. He continued swimming, and just as a wave approached, he dove straight in, only to find something immediately attached to his face. When he came out of the water, the kids nearby were screaming. A blue bottle jellyfish was wrapped around Salty Squid's face. He frantically pulled it off and felt his face stinging. The doctors told him if he had kept his eyes open a split second earlier, he would have been left blind.
The weirdest rule that Dean's school ever had was when he was in the 3rd grade. They weren't allowed to have backpacks that were brown in color. Dean and his friends didn't know why at first, but then they were told it was considered offensive to some people. The school never specified which people brown backpacks offended. Dean ended up going to a different school where he carried a non-offensive camouflage-colored backpack.
I'm not a jokester. I don't tell jokes. I'm terrible at jokes. So I just don't even try these days. However, I do know somebody who told me a joke that was so awkward and so creepy, I cringe to this day. So in the 7th grade, I was in the cafeteria getting lunch, and there was this guy behind me who was really tall and really awkward. As I was getting my food, I said out loud, "Oh, I can't wait to eat this." And this guy behind me says to my face, "I can't wait to eat you." And it just made me so incredibly uncomfortable that I couldn't even eat. That was it. My lunch was ruined.
When Slapped Ham was 12 years old, his dad sent him out to buy bread at the grocery store. So he took the subway, and on the way he heard a man yelling. This man was looking at any woman in sight and saying that they were beautiful. Ham turned his head down, hoping he wouldn't look at him, but he ended up looking anyway, and he started saying things like, "Why are you so shy? Don't be afraid to show your face. You're so beautiful." Ham just pretended not to hear him. He sat on the subway for 2 more minutes until he got off at a stop. Luckily, he didn't follow Ham off, although he did run into him 2 more times before being rid of him forever.
Pandora was sitting in her Spanish class, listening to the teacher talking in Spanish. Just when she was about to fall asleep, some random kid knocked on her door. The teacher opened it, and the kid yelled, "Hey, I fucked this teacher! She loved it when I cuffed her and fucked her raw!" After that, he walked out. The teacher was blushing and in shock. The whole class, excluding Pandora, made fun of her. The teasing continued for most of the class until the teacher decided to walk out. Pandora walked after her as she entered the bathroom. She told the teacher that the whole thing would blow over and spoke some kind words to her. Later that day, the kid was arrested for sexual harassment, had to do a month of community service, and was suspended for 1 week. He did the same thing to all the female teachers in the wing of that school.
Dean was a victim of something particularly stupid back in 5th grade. He had to submit a paper to a very strict science teacher, so when Dean couldn't find the paper to turn in, she got mad at him. But she told him to turn it in the next day for some credit. When the next day arrived, Dean gave her his paper and walked away. He glanced back at his teacher, who had a clueless expression on her face. It was like she didn't know what to do with the paper. So she threw it away in the nearest garbage can. Shocked, Dean continued walking. The day after, his teacher went up to him and said that he didn't give her his paper. Dean was pissed and told her that he gave it to her the previous day. She accused him of lying and ended up giving him detention.
One day, while Tolop and Spincis were hanging out watching Animu, Tolop's ex, who had previously cheated on him, knocked on Tolop's door. Tolop answered it. Before he could say anything, Spincis looked at her and said, "You're the bitch!" Spincis grabbed her by the hair, dragged her to the grass, started beating the crap out of her. Then Spincis came back inside and took a shower. Tolop hasn't seen his ex since.
One time when Slapped Ham was 13, he was supposed to go to his dad's house for the whole summer. He hated staying with his dad because it meant he had to help his dad at work, where he slaved in the hot sun all day with no pay. One day he was so fed up with all the heat and heavy lifting that he refused to work anymore. When they got home that night, he made Slapped Ham sit down at the table and for 2 straight hours eat none but hot baked beans. Anytime he stopped, his dad would scream at him until he continued. He ended up vomiting beans everywhere and can't stand the sight of them to this day.
Dolan blows his nose without a tissue, and it drives his mom nuts. When he feels like something's up in there and either can't get a decent tissue or doesn't want to bother finding one, he'll just blow. In his opinion, it's more convenient. More often than not much comes out when he blows his nose with a tissue as opposed to the mess that he can leave his nose when he doesn't use one. The only real downside is ruining an area on the front of his shirt.
When Hellbent was 4 or 5, his aunt, for some reason, would give him $1 for unzipping his pants and whipping out his willy every time he went to her house. And since he was small, Hellbent would do it. After he would show it, she would give him $1. Hellbent remembered even whipping it out in front of a crowd too. And everyone looked shocked, except her. He would be thinking, hey, easy money by showing his moneymaker and all. Now when Hellbent thinks back, he laughs about it since he was so small and didn't know any better.
When Shima was 6 years old, her and her sister had this really mean babysitter whenever their mom was out doing her job. She rarely fed them and always mixed up their belongings. She would even beat them, even though they did nothing wrong. One day, the babysitter started yelling at Shima for reasons she didn't even know. Being 6 years old at the time, she tried talking to her to calm her down. Then, out of nowhere, she bit her nose and gave her a horrible nosebleed. When her mom got home, Shima told her the whole story. But she didn't believe her. It wasn't until another incident involving her forcing her and her sisters to wear each other's pajamas, with her sister only being 2. Their mother was so livid at the woman that she never brought them back. When Shima got older, she heard a rumor that the woman in question had been sent away to prison. But it felt like it wasn't good enough.
Gooby and her sister Snoopy were fighting about who should get the last piece of candy. Their mum walked in on them fighting and, after a few minutes of watching them fight, said, "That's enough. The 2 of you are going to stop fighting." The punishment was for Gooby to go to the coldest room in the house with nothing on, while Snoopy's was to go to the hottest room in the house and wear all the jackets they had.
In his freshman year of high school, Hellbent had an oral fixation he would satisfy by chewing on toothpicks. One day, his mom gave him some root beer flavored toothpicks. When he brought them to school and pulled them out, people were curious about them. Being the cool and quiet one, Hellbent had told them that they were made from marijuana. He called them hash picks. At first, no one believed him. But after he sold one of them to one of the dumb kids, people started asking for them. He charged $10 a pick. After a few months, his mom approached him saying that someone is selling marijuana toothpicks at school. Hellbent told her the story and they both laughed at people's stupidity.
Doopy met her best friend in a weird way. She broke up with her boyfriend for her. One day in math class, Doopy and the girl began to talk after the girl asked if she could borrow a pencil. The girl mentioned that while she didn't know many people, she already had a boyfriend. When Doopy asked his name, the girl answered, making her frown. It turned out that Doopy dated him in the past, but broke up with him because he was a creep. She told the girl that she had dated him before, but that she regretted it. A week later, the girl walked into math class with a desperate look on her face. She shouted, "I can't do it!" Doopy asked,
Do what?
The girl began ranting about how her boyfriend is insanely clingy, hates it when she talks to other people, and how he wants her to dress up as a Pokemon so they can have fun. She even showed Doopy some lewd pictures that he had sent her of Pokemon and furries.
Yeah, you need to break up with that,
said Doopy as she cringed and pushed the phone away. Since it was her first boyfriend, the girl said she couldn't bring herself to break up with him. Seeing how distraught she was, Doopy told her that she would do it for her, since she hated the guy anyway. So, at lunchtime, she went to the library where he was and said,
Hey, your girlfriend is dumping you. Don't talk to her again, please.
The guy never talked to Doopy and the girl again, and they've been best friends ever since.
When they were in 5th grade, Sid and some of his classmates were in the library reading random books. While browsing around for a book, Sid came across a book that caught his interest. It was about Japan, and he immediately thought that it looked like a nice place to visit someday. A few hours later, he went home and ate lunch with his grandmother. Suddenly, a program they were watching was interrupted by a news bulletin, which was about the Tohoku tsunami and the earthquake that hit Japan. Sid was surprised that the news bulletin came soon after he'd read the book about Japan. But that wasn't the end. He was surfing the net about random shit, mostly anime related. He stumbled upon a Wikipedia page about a countryside in Japan from a certain anime wiki page. Sid thought that place looked really peaceful and wanted to go there. The next day, he read an article about a small earthquake that hit Japan in the exact same area as that countryside.
When Sweet Commando was 10, he lived next to a family that had 2 ferocious dogs. One day, the vicious dogs broke through the wooden fence and attacked one of Sweet Commando's dogs. He ran up to his golden retriever as it laid covered in blood. But his dog was in shock and thought he was attacking it, so it bit Sweet Commando's hand so badly that he needed stitches. 7 years later, the evil dogs ended up breaking through the fence again, but this time Sweet Commando's retriever beat the hell out of both of them and they limped back to their yard with their tails between their legs.
When Doopy was in 8th grade, she agreed to go on a date with a boy for Valentine's Day. When she met him at the cinema, things got awkward when she realized he had brought his whole family with him. His mom asked him, "Why would you go out with a skinny girl like her? She get a wider girl who has a better appetite." Doopy insisted that she has a great appetite. She just doesn't get fat easily. Then his brother started accusing her of stealing soda from him at school. Her date and his family gave her the most evil glare. Needless to say, she never saw him again.
Hellbent started his freshman year of high school. He was trying to make friends and attract cute girls. One day in gym class, he was talking to his friend Pringle. Being young, he wanted to look cool and casual, so he put one foot up on a chair and rested his arm on his leg like the cowboys do in Western TV shows. They noticed girls gathering directly across from them in the gym. First 2 girls, then 3, until more than 6 girls were smiling and giggling as they looked at Pringle and Hellbent. After a quick assessment, Pringle discovered the source of their attention and amusement. He leaned in and whispered to Hellbent, "Yo dude, your nutsack is hanging out." Needless to say, it was the longest gym class Hellbent ever had.
One habit that I have that seems to annoy a couple of people is whenever I agree with someone, instead of saying, "Yes, I agree," I go, "Ugh." Now why do I do this? I don't know. It's just fun. And the fact that it annoys people just makes it even better. Ugh. Back in high school, Kyle M was staying over at Gergak's house for the weekend. They were playing Halo 3 when Gergak's wireless controller batteries died. They went searching for batteries and ended up in his mom's room. Gergak started digging through his mom's dresser and he found a battery-powered vibrator. He went to his mom, vibrator in hand, and asked her, "What the hell is this?" She replied with, "That doesn't work." So Gergak turned it on and it started vibrating. He then took the batteries out and handed it to his mom.
and they went back to playing Halo like nothing happened. A couple of weeks later, Gergak found the vibrator again, put the batteries in it, and proceeded to chase his sister around the house with it while moaning.
When I was on the bus on my way home from school, I was doodling in my notebook. Nothing fancy, just some anime girls, some trees, and maybe a Pokemon here or there. I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned around. It was a really buff-looking guy with a ton of tattoos. At first I got scared because I thought I stepped on his toe or something. But then he looked at me straight in the eye and asked, Could you make me a Pikachu tattoo? I couldn't believe he was being serious, but I kept looking at him, and then he said, I'll pay you $300. Of course, I said yes. And to my surprise, he wasn't joking. Before he had to get off the bus, I finished the doodle. I thought he was kidding, but he took out $300 in cash and gave it to me, and then texted me a photo of his arm a couple weeks later. He really did get the Pikachu tattoo. All fine by me.
Spincess has a really big fear of light bathroom doors. Whenever she needs to go to a public restroom, she first tests the door to make sure that it's not too light, and then she pushes open the door. She sometimes forgets to check first, and when she pushes the door open, she falls right through because she was prepared for a heavy door that she would need to lean on, not a door that she can open by a light breeze.
Dolan went to school with a foreign exchange student and he really wanted to impress her. He asked a friend what kind of guy she likes, and his friend asked another friend, who asked another friend, who asked another friend. By the time he got a reply, someone told Dolan she likes a guy who can eat a fence. He thought this was weird, went outside and started eating a wooden fence, post by post. When she finally asked him what the hell he was doing, he said, I thought you liked the guy who eats fences. She stared at him in shock and said, I told my friend I like a guy with common sense. He didn't get a date with her, but he did have to have a tetanus shot.
Sid has seen some shit at his school. One time during recess, when Sid was in 4th grade, him and his best friends were talking and reading like they always did. Suddenly, one kid ran out of the cafeteria and out to the gym. His hands and face covered with gravy. He yelled, Fear me! Sid doesn't think his teachers get paid enough for that bullshit.
When Legno was a freshman in high school, one of his friends brought his younger brother to school. At first, everything was normal, but in the middle of class, his friend's brother pulled down his pants and thought it would be all right to take a piss on one of the desks. The teacher was out of the room at the time, but when he came back, he blamed the kid who was sitting at the desk that had piss all over it. His friend's younger brother didn't even get into trouble.
When she was in 8th grade, Pandora was sitting in class the day progress reports were being handed out. The kid sitting next to her looked over her progress report and noticed her birth date. He was shocked to find out that she was older than he was. Most students were cool with her being the oldest, even though they were still surprised. However, the kid next to Pandora wasn't having it. He literally yelled at her face, saying she couldn't be older than him. Pandora's friends stood up for her, but the kid yelled at her too, saying she was also a liar. When the teacher came over, she asked Pandora what was going on. Pandora told her. The teacher gave the kid the most dumbfounded look and sent him to the office. Later, Pandora found out the reason the kid got so mad is because he always bragged about being the oldest in the grade. The kid continued to give Pandora problems until she began to get homeschooled. To this day, she's still confused about the whole thing. One time, Pringle went for a drive to see his mother on Mother's Day. He was going 70 miles per hour down the highway, and a left turn overlooking a cliff was approaching. Pringle was preparing to take the turn when he suddenly lost a wheel. Not a tire, a wheel. He watched it roll away in his passenger side mirror. He's not sure what black magic caused it, but Pringle managed to turn the car and stop seconds before the edge of the cliff.
The first time that Melissa asked a guy out, she was super nervous. But it turns out that she had nothing to worry about because it actually went really well. He said yes, and they excitedly made plans to go on a date together. That night, Melissa got all dressed up and went to the place where they had arranged to meet. But when she got there, her date was nowhere to be found. Melissa realized that she had been stood up. Apparently, the guy had no intention of coming on the date. But he was too shy to tell her this, so he just agreed to the date and then chickened out. What a dick.
One night, while home alone, one of Emoji's friends had dropped them off after marching band practice. Exhausted, he fell into bed. As he laid there, he heard the sound of rocks moving outside. He didn't think anything of it, but the sound kept him awake long enough for him to realize that he forgot to lock the door. Begrudgingly, Emoji got out of bed and went to the front door to lock it. After locking it, he started walking back to his room when he was suddenly stopped by the sound of the door handle jiggling. He looked at the door to see the handle moving as if someone were trying desperately to open it. There was a window right next to the door, so he opened the curtains and came face to face with the would-be intruder. He was a tall, pale man with long blonde hair. He wore a black hoodie with the hood up. The man looked completely surprised to see someone else looking back at him. Emoji's first instinct was to immediately run back to his room. He locked the door and called the police. When the cops arrived, they did a full sweep of the property, but they didn't find the intruder. His whereabouts as of right now are quite unknown.
When Pandora was 13, her parents took her to visit her kooky grandma. As soon as they arrived, Pandora's parents had to go shopping, so they left Pandora alone with her grandma. Pandora's grandma asked her to wait on the porch while she went inside to get something. She came back holding a weird burning candle and said,
"This will ward off all the evil around you."
Pandora nodded, and so her grandma started walking around her shouting random gibberish. Pandora was then told to twirl around in circles while spinning her arms and hopping on one foot. When she was finished, she had to sing a hymn at the top of her lungs to appease the lost spirits. Pandora felt really stupid afterwards. When her parents came back, they looked at Pandora and asked why she smelled like smoke and burned hair.
One time, Spincess drank whiskey for the first time and got drunk. She had to poop, so she walked outside, stripped off all her clothes, and shit on the front lawn. Her parents had to walk her inside and give her a shower while her boyfriend Tolop waited outside. In the morning, he walked into the room and told Spincess that she was a very funny drunk.
When I was younger, in elementary school, there was a girl who was supposed to be my best friend. She was constantly bullied because she was kind of poor and she smelled and she picked her nose a lot. She was always picking her nose. One day, she was crying and asking me what she could do to make the bullying stop. And I told her that it was okay that she picked her nose, that it was normal and it was good for her, because deep down, I knew that I picked my nose and I didn't want to feel bad about it. So I told her that it was good for her to pick her nose. And she did, and the bullying never stopped. And I always felt responsible. Please don't hate me.
Kylan once went to Walmart and needed to take a piss really bad. He made it to the bathroom just in time, but the urinals were taken and both stalls were full. He had no choice but to wait, but while he was waiting, some kid shouted a live commentary of what he was doing. He said,
Pull down the pants, pulling out my penis, taking a piss.
Kylan was about to laugh, but his dad was there, so he had to stop.
Melissa was 9. She used to play hide and seek with her friend outside of her friend's mother's liquor store. One time, while her friend was counting, Melissa decided to hide in a nearby alley. While she was in there, a young homeless woman came out from behind a dumpster. The homeless woman creepily said, "Hey kid, do you want anyone to disappear forever? I'd be glad to help." Melissa raced inside to tell her mom, and together they called the cops. The homeless lady was gone, but she had left a note that said, "I'll come back for you."
One day, Ladybot and her sister came home with new pet birds. Her sister had a green one, while Ladybot had a blue one. A strange old woman saw Ladybot and her sister with the birds and asked if she could either have the feathers or the birds. Of course, Ladybot and her sister refused. The woman particularly liked the bird Ladybot's sister had. She continued bothering them about the birds day and night, but they would always say no. One day, Ladybot's bird got sick and died. When her mum buried it in a trash bag, Ladybot's sister suggested they give the dead bird to the strange old woman instead. Ladybot cried so loud that she sounded like a wounded dog. That was when their mother made the weird rule not to give feathers or dead birds to others. She went on to tell the girls to stay far away from the woman.